Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inquirer Live at GameDay Central. Today, we're coming to you live from the press box at Minute Maid Park in Houston, Texas, where the Phillies will face off against the Houston Astros in Game 1 of the World Series. I'm Scott Lauber, baseball writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I'm joined by my fellow Inquirer sports writer, Matt Breen. Matt, how you doing?
It's good, Scott. How you doing? I'm stoked, as they say in Philly right now.
You're stoked. You're at the World Series. What were the odds that would happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, that really says, to move my head a little bit, people can say it. That is the Phillies in the World Series. It's 2022. Who would have thought this a month ago? It's been crazy, but we're here.
We are. And so for our audience watching at home, please head over to inquirer.com/World Series for the most up-to-date reporting on the Phillies. And Matt, with Game 1 here finally upon us, let's get right to it. And I guess we've been here for a day now, and we went through the workout and the media day yesterday. What are your general thoughts, I guess, so far on the atmosphere of the World Series? Phillies haven't been here in 13 years. Your first World Series. What are your thoughts on kind of the whole environment, the whole atmosphere?
My first World Series. That's what everybody's talking about in Houston. That Matt Breen has finally made it to the World Series. But no, I think my takeaway from yesterday, I thought about this morning, was that the Phillies, as a group of team players, that most of them hadn't even been in the playoffs. Even, the ones that had, most of them had not won in the playoffs, and very few have been here already. I didn't sense any nerves yesterday. I don't know if you did. Talk to guys just about, like, you have a World Series patch on your hat now. Is that cool? And Zach Eflin's like, yeah, I looked at it. It was cool, but you don't put the hat on, you don't feel the patch anymore. And Zach Wheeler said, same thing. And he said, yeah, we looked at the patches on our jerseys and said, that's neat. And then we put them on. And it's just like, this team doesn't seem like they're going to, shy away from the big moment or the big stage. And I think that comes down to the manager and the way that he has them prepared. Reminds me a lot of, and you were there in 08 with Charlie Manuel and the Rubber Ducks before that first game in Tampa Bay to make sure they weren't tight. And I don't sense any tightness, nerves, nothing coming from this Phillies team, even though they've never been, for the most part, on this stage before.
So let's start here. Let's talk about the road they took to get here to the World Series. And I'll be honest with you, coming in from the airport yesterday, my first thought was, because I was here on October 3rd in Houston when the Phillies clinched a playoff spot, and my first thought driving back into town was had no idea. I did not think there was any way that I'd be back here again. Not this year, at least. It felt like, hey, they had climbed a mountain. They had qualified for the playoffs. That's not something that many of them had done. And I thought that was great, and this would probably end like in the first or second round, but never in the World Series. And so I asked a lot of players yesterday. I said, you guys left here on October 5th. Did you ever think you'd be back? And the answer I got from a lot of them was, yeah, we didn't think it was crazy. Like Bryce Harper kept saying, we're not going to lose today. We're not going to lose today before every game they played. And darn it, I mean, they won 9 of 11 in order to get here, and here they are. So, yeah, I got a lot of what you did about kind of the confidence and not a whole lot of, like, first-timer, eyes wide open, awed by the whole thing kind of a reaction yesterday.
Yeah, I think they felt so much weight and pressure in September just to get in after falling short the last 4 years, obviously knowing it had been since 2011 that the Phillies made the playoffs, and hearing about every year you heard about, well, it's September, are the Phillies going to collapse again? And they almost did this year, but they didn't. Luckily, there's a third wild card spot. They took advantage of it. They got into the dance. And I think when I think back at that game in Houston, John Middleton said afterwards in the clubhouse, and I was at home watching on TV, you were actually there, he said, this is kind of like 07, and, we had to get through. And so I would be a little surprised if he'll say, yeah, I knew we could get here. But his first initial reaction was that this was 07, and we knew what 07 meant. 07 gave that group of Phillies the confidence to win it in 08. But this is not 07 because obviously the Phillies didn't get swept in the DS. And as much of a surprise as this was, and this came out of nowhere really, this isn't St. Peter's. This is not the 93 Phillies where it's a career year or an underdog. When they signed Bryce Harper, we immediately talked about, well, when can the Phillies get to the World Series? That was the whole point of that. This was been building. It did happen out of nowhere. But if you go back to spring training when they signed Castellanos and Schwarber that weekend, that was the whole point, was to be here right now. So it happened in a weird, strange way, but the Phillies aren't, St. Peter's. This is not a happy to be here underdog story. It's a really good baseball team playing another really good baseball team.
Yeah, I think nationally they are an underdog, and everyone looks at them and says, well, they're the 87-win team underdog that's playing against the 106-win, behemoth and the Astros. But, you're really not an underdog if you have a $247 million payroll. And it's the largest payroll in franchise history, and they didn't spend that money in order to be a lovable underdog. They spent that money to get here to this place, to the World Series. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit about the way they got here. I was down in that clubhouse on October 3rd, and a lot of players at that time said, well, this is great. We're happy to be celebrating, but we plan on doing this 4 more times. And I'll be honest, I heard that and I said, well, that's nice. I'm glad they think that way. They should think that way. But I mean, really, and they went to St. Louis and they swept the Cardinals and they celebrated again in St. Louis. And then they went to Atlanta, and Atlanta, who won the National League East with 101 wins, and they looked like the team to beat. And the Phillies beat them, and they celebrated again. And then they went to the NLCS against the Padres, and 5 games they won it again. So here they are, and I guess we could talk about any moment during this run, and not to put you on the spot, Matt, but years from now, when you're telling your sons about what it was like to be around the 22 Phillies in October of this month, of this year, what's going to be kind of your go-to moment, your go-to story, the thing that you tell them about?
I mean, it's got to be the Harper homer, right? The Harper homer, the Schwarber homer. The Harper home run is an iconic moment. There's like probably 5 iconic moments in Phillies history that you'll talk about forever, and that's on that Mount Rushmore of moments. No matter what happens this week, even if the Phillies win the World Series, that is still probably the takeaway moment from this run. And the crazy thing about it wasn't a shot. People, if you watch those videos, people are filming that at bat because they expect Bryce Harper to do something. It wasn't like, oh my God, he hit a home run, I'm stunned. It was like, yeah, it was amazing. It was awesome to see, but you kind of were like, Harper's up. He loves the big moments. Here it comes. Get your phone out. I'm going to film this. And that's what happened. So I think just to, this job it's fun and it's great and we love it. But I think to be able to be there for moments like that makes it special. And it's even this week, I don't know if you're the same way, but I love the job, and I love coming to the ballpark and working and stuff like that. But I don't ever really look at a game like I cannot wait to get to that game on that night. And like this week, being home after the CS, and I was like, I cannot wait to be in that ballpark Friday night. I just, it's like this is why you, especially you this season, but this is why you're at the ballpark in June, and when everyone's down the shore, and you're at the ballpark to get to tonight. And it's just, we're lucky to chronicle moments like Harper's home run, Schwarber's home run, and obviously whatever happens, this week here.
Yeah, what did Harper say right on the way to home plate? Let's do something they remember. and I mean, you knew it. You knew it in the moment. You knew it when he hit it. Like, as soon as that ball got out, I was thinking, like, that's Matt Stairs in 2008. That's David Ortiz in 2013. That's up there on the list of the top 3 to 5 home runs that I've seen personally in my career, 17 years of covering baseball. And you knew it at the time. But the crazy thing about this run, and I think it's true of most teams that get this far, is that you could name a player, and I could give you a moment that player contributed to this run, whether it's, Gene Segura with the hit in St. Louis, which I still think might have been the biggest hit of their season. Bryce Harper with his home run in Game 2 in St. Louis, which might have been the biggest swing of even his season, because it was his first real big postseason moment with the Phillies, and he'd had a rough finish to the season, and I think that home run did a lot to unlock him a little bit and let him think, like, okay, I'm back, here I am. You talk about Rhys Hoskins in the bat spike, JT in the inside the park home run, Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola and what they've done all month long. You name it, you name the player, and I'll tell you what they did during this run. And that's pretty unique. It's pretty special. And I think that's probably the reason more than any other why they're here, is because they've gotten that from really player number 1 on the roster to player number 26.
Yeah, I thought of that today when I was watching all these great hype videos that people made on Twitter. The Phillies made one, and all these Twitter characters made them, and it's just fun to watch them. And there were so many moments, and it's crazy. Where as great as '08 was, I don't think there was the Stairs, the Victorino home run. Burrell had the home run in Milwaukee. I don't know if there was as many great individual moments that will live on forever to get you to the World Series. As there was.
I remember more of the World Series moments, like the Carlos Ruiz tapper to win Game 3, and the Joe Blanton home run in Game 4, and certainly that whole thing. Maybe it's that your memory gets clouded over time, but the Matt Stairs home run in the LCS was clearly the moment to me that got them there. I guess you certainly think about the Victorino Grand Slam and the Brett Myers walk that preceded it, and so there were things along the way. But to me, that was about the World Series and how well they played against Tampa, and of course Game 5 suspended and resumed, and all the things that went into that. But this has just been it's been a month full of those moments. It's not hard to fill a highlight reel. And since we've talked about where they've been, let's talk about where they are and where they're going, and this World Series, the 118th World Series, which begins tonight. And we'll talk about the pitching matchup in Game 1. It all begins with Justin Verlander against Aaron Nola. And Matt, I think it's probably the first time this month that the Phillies have had Nola or Zach Wheeler on the mound and not been favored to win the game. I think maybe. Verlander's 39. He's got 2 Cy Young awards. He's going to win his 3rd this year. He's playoff tested. There's a funny moment yesterday during his press conference when Dave Dombrowski ducked in to say hello. Dombrowski was the Tigers' president of baseball operations when Verlander made his debut at age 23, way back when. So they have a history. How do you look at this? I mean, obviously Verlander is a huge mountain to climb, a huge hill to climb in Game 1 for the Phillies.
Yeah, Verlander obviously is one of the all-time, elite baseball pitchers, but this season especially is just like the fountain of youth. He's been absolutely incredible, lights out, and he struck out 11 Yankees in 6 innings, but he also got hit around by the Mariners. So it's and he's one of the best pitchers that never won a World Series game. So it's curious to see what Justin Verlander and the Phillies are going to get tonight. And I'm really curious to see how Aaron Nola responds to getting roughed up a little bit in San Diego. But he also has a lot of rest. He's, like you mentioned, career high in innings this season. So he probably needed a little bit of a break here. And he's on, I think, 8 days rest coming in tonight. And if anybody, if we talk about guys shying away from the big moment, I don't think you're going to have that worry with Wheeler and Nola. And especially, I think Nola is a guy that after getting, blowing a 4-0 lead in San Diego in that game, I think that's someone who probably wore that a little bit and is, excited or, determined to come out tonight and pitch better and make up for that. But it's a great lineup. It's a really great lineup he's going up against, and a great pitcher. And should be a fantastic game. I'm excited to see what Verlander shows up, and obviously to see what Aaron Nola can do.
Verlander has had, his share of great postseason moments during his career. But it's interesting. I was talking to some people yesterday, and the Phillies all along thought, if they could only get into the playoffs, they liked their chances, because as long as they could start Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler in some order in the first 2 games of a series, they thought they'd be a tough team to beat. And it's turned out that way. But you never really know, even with great pitchers, how they're going to respond to postseason. I saw Chris Sale, after a long wait to get into the postseason, get hit hard his first time around. Not everyone's Roy Halladay, right? Not everyone goes out there and throws a no-hitter in their first postseason game. And Justin Verlander is a good example of a great pitcher who, for a little while, had a hard time getting over that postseason hump. And I asked Dave Dombrowski about it yesterday, what gave you the confidence that Wheeler and Nola would be Wheeler and Nola in the postseason, and that, the weird playoff gremlins that get, Verlander occasionally and Kershaw wouldn't get those guys. And he said, you really don't know until they're there, but he thought maybe because they were both older guys, veteran pitchers who pitched a long time without making the playoffs, that the moment wouldn't be too big. And sure enough, the moment hasn't been too big. I'm going to steal a stat from our colleague Dave Murphy. Aaron Nola allowed 5 or more runs in 6 starts this season. In his next start, after each of those starts, he gave up a total of 4 runs in 45 innings. 3 of those times he went 8 scoreless. And so Nola has, bounced back. He's shown the ability to bounce back. I also think that on some subconscious level, it probably helps him that he's back here in Houston, because this to me was where he chased away all of those demons about like, oh, Aaron Nola can't win a big game down the stretch. He had a no-hitter going into the 7th inning that night on October 3rd to help them clinch. And I think that was like the moment where he got over that hurdle. And, it probably can't hurt that he's back on this mound here again tonight in the biggest game of his life.
He's not facing his brother either.
He is not, but he's facing his college roommate, Alex Bregman. Yeah, no big deal?
Nah, no big deal. And yeah, I think that speaks for the whole Phillies team about resiliency and bouncing back. This team was cooked in D.C. I mean, you were at that doubleheader. I was home. I remember texting you about 1964 and telling you what the magic number was in 64 in case you wanted to use it for a story. And they ended up coming out the doubleheader that night. They blow out the Nationals. They win the next day, and they're celebrating here on a Monday. Right at 2 days after it looked like it was over, they were wild card champions going to the playoffs. And next thing you know, they're in the World Series. So I think this is all season. Obviously, in June, you fire a manager, dead in the water Memorial Day, and they just came back. They're resilient, and that's how you have to be resilient. Every team that gets to the World Series is resilient in some way, and the Phillies surely are that.
I do wonder what would have happened if they weren't playing the Nationals that night in that doubleheader, whether that game one loss lingers a little longer. But we won't go there. I mean, they won, they made it into the playoffs, and here we are in the World Series. Let's think beyond game one. We know Zach Wheeler will get the start in game 2 for the Phillies. We expect Ranger Suarez will start in game 3. Beyond that, it's really not clear. I think the Astros rotation, I don't think there's any question, is deeper than the Phillies rotation. They've got their choice after game 2, after Framber Valdez. They've got Lance McCullers, and he'll probably start game 3. They've got Christian Javier, Luis Garcia, Jose Urquidy. They've got a lot to choose from. What do you think the Phillies end up doing in game 4? I know we've got a long way to go to get there, and maybe a lot depends on what happens in the first 3 games, but I guess Noah Syndergaard. I mean, is that kind of your guess as well for game 4?
For sure. My keys to the series, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but it has to do with this. I think they need to split in Houston. You have to win one of these 2 games. You need a decent start from Ranger Suarez. He has to hold his own and give you something, which he did in the last round. And then game 4 is I would go with Syndergaard. This is not a key. Those are my keys, those 2 things. And then game 4, you just have to hope it works out. But game 4, I start Syndergaard, and I would have started Syndergaard in the CS. I'm sure I told you this. He's not Thor, right? He's Noah.
Right.
But he's a guy that has been there, and he's a guy that has an I don't want to call it an ego because that has a negative connotation, but he definitely has self-confidence.
There's a swagger.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to go and lay an egg. He wants to prove everybody that in his head he still thinks he's Thor, and he wants to prove that he's still Noah Syndergaard from with the Mets. And I just think he's not going to give you 7 shutout innings, but he can be a big game pitcher and still give you 3 shutout innings, and that's all you need from him. And I think that's why I would have used him against the Padres, and I would definitely use him in the World Series.
There's some money to be made if you're Noah Syndergaard. If you start game 4 and you pitch well, he's a free agent, and you said he's not Thor anymore, but he can show everybody on the biggest stage there is that he can still be a very good starting pitcher in this league. So, I agree. I think that there's a kind of confidence about him that, that comes from somebody who once upon a time threw 98 miles an hour. Not all of us did that once upon a time. He did, and he was, you did when you faced your college roommate, right? In the World Series. That's why it's no big deal. He used to come out. He used to throw 98. He was the stud in this star-studded young rotation in New York, of all places. And I agree with you. I don't think that the moment or the stage is going to be too big for him, even though he's never been there before. I agree. I think that I agree with your keys. I think the real key to Game 4 is they're going to have to do what they did in their last Game 4, which is get the offense going and score 10 runs. And it was the 5 guys. It was Schwarber, Hoskins, Real Muto, Harper, and Castellanos, who went 9 for 19 in that game and drove in all 10 runs. And that's the way you win Game 4 when you have a bullpen game. We're getting ahead of ourselves, though.
Score 2 touchdowns.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about the lineups. We talked about the rotations, which probably favor the Astros. in terms of depth, although I would take the Phillies 1 and 2 pretty much against anybody. How about the lineups? Because for me, for a team that won 106 games, the Astros don't have this like super juggernaut offense, and they haven't lit it up in the postseason. I was talking to Reggie Jackson yesterday, and he mentioned, there are some guys on this roster who really haven't hit in the postseason. Jose Altuve is, I think, 3 for 32, and Yordan Alvarez, after having a great divisional series, he was quiet in the LCS. So they've got to kind of get their offense going. But what makes them dangerous to me is they don't strike out a ton. They put the ball in play, and sometimes when you're the Phillies, that's not the greatest thing in the world, because the Phillies defense, while it's way better than it was at the start of the season, still kind of shaky at times.
Yeah, Stott made the error in game 4 at third base and on the throw to second. I think, and Rhys Hoskins. But I think, like you said, the defense is a lot better. For me, the Phillies lineup, we take it for granted, I think, because you watch it 162 times and you ride the ups and downs of it, and you see the good times and the bad times, and the bad times probably resonate more than the good times do. So when they were playing St. Louis, I thought about this. I said, put myself in the head of like a Cardinals fan at Busch Stadium. You go to the game, you sit down in your seat, you look up at the scoreboard and who the Phillies are playing, and you said, oh, it's Rhys Hoskins, it's Bryce Harper, it's Nick Castellanos, it's Kyle Schwarber, it's Alec Boehm. It's guys that it's JT Realmuto. There's like 5 to 6 guys that are like known commodities in baseball. There's not a lot of like deep cuts where it's like, who the heck is that guy?
Gene Segura.
Yeah, Gene Segura, even a former All-Star. There's just not a lot of like, who was that guy on the Cardinals with the goofy name? I was like, who the heck is this guy? And I'm like watching the game, but there's not a lot of that in the Phillies where there's known guys that you're so close to.
Lars Nootbaar.
Yeah, Lars Nootbaar. I was like, come on, they don't have that guy, and he might be great. I don't know, but he's a deep cut to me. There's not a lot of deep cuts on the Phillies, and I think we need to give that a little bit of respect. That this is a really, really good lineup, and this is a lineup, like you said, that can carry you in Game 4, carry them in Game 4 of the CS, and I think it's a lineup that has struck out at times. If you go, obviously the big strikeout number, certain months of the season, certain stretches can go into a slump, but when they're hot, and they are hot right now. And it's dangerous if they can stay hot.
Yeah, I mean, flip it around. I mean, think about being a Phillies fan. If you were a Phillies fan in Busch Stadium for that series, or if you're watching at home and you're looking at their lineup and you say, well, who do you have to stop on the Cardinals to beat them? You have to stop Arenado and Goldschmidt. And if you do that, and that's not saying that's easy or anything, but if you do that, you have a very good chance. If you're watching the Padres series, who do you have to stop? Well, you have to stop Machado and Soto. And if you do that, you have a pretty good chance. So if you're the Astros and you're looking at the Phillies lineup, okay, why would you throw Bryce Harper anything? Why would you give him anything to hit? But if you do that, if you eliminate him somehow, which nobody's been able to do so far this postseason, you still have to get out Schwarber, who hit a 488-foot home run the other night. You still have to get out Hoskins, the bat spike, which turned around the Braves series. You still have to get out Realmuto, who is probably going to finish in the top 6 maybe in the MVP voting this year. Castellanos hasn't had the year everyone dreamed about in Philly, but he's still a dangerous hitter. Gene Segura might have the 2 biggest hits in the playoffs so far, not non-Bryce Harper division for the Phillies. Bryson Stott is a rookie who is not a comfortable at bat if you're the other team. Alec Boehm, not a comfortable at bat if you're the other team. So not a whole lot of places to catch your breath if you're the opposing pitcher or the opposing catcher. For the Phillies, I think their lineup is deeper than the Astros in the way that the Astros rotation is deeper than the Phillies. And I think the Phillies have the potential to score a lot of runs, as good as the Astros pitching is. One other thing which is sort of newsworthy today is the Astros added finally a lefty to their bullpen. It's Will Smith, who ironically threw the last pitch of the World Series last year for the Braves against the Astros. They've gone up until this point without a lefty in their bullpen. Seems to me that they probably wanted Will Smith to be there because if it's the 7th inning and you need somebody to face Schwarber or Harper, you probably want a lefty to do it. They've controlled lefties very well with their right-handed pitching, but I do wonder whether the lack of lefties, even with Will Smith, works in the Phillies' favor late in the game.
Yeah, we haven't seen Will Smith since he slapped Chris Rock. I had to get that one in. But yeah, I think you needed a left-handed pitcher in the bullpen. Obviously, it would have been strange if you didn't have a lefty to nullify the Phillies lineup late in the game, and that's what they've had. And I think you're going to see Dusty Baker use that more than Bob Melvin used it in the CS. I think they're going to see if Harper's coming up. They're going to go to that left-handed pitcher late in the game. They're not going to let him face a right-hander. Next thing you know, there's a ball in the seats.
See, this is what you get at Game Day Central. You get good Will Smith jokes. I was going to make a baseball nerd Will Smith joke in reference to the Dodgers catcher, but see, you took it another level. You took it up another level. You went Philly. You went Will Smith.
That would have been a good joke. That would have been funny.
What, Will Smith, the Dodgers catcher? No,
yeah, that would have been. Yeah,
no, it wouldn't. It would not have. So we've touched on so much, and Game 1 is upon us here soon. Let's sort of start with Game 1. We talked about Nola and what he does after he loses. We talked about Verlander. What's your feeling on Game 1? Because I'll say this, sitting next to you in the press box for these series, you've had a pretty good feel. You're the one who looked at me when all heck was breaking loose in Atlanta in Game 1 against Max Fried, and you said, dude, the series is over.
It was like the third inning.
It was. I think it was earlier than that. And I said, they won 101 games this year, and they're the defending champs, and we got a long way to go. And you're like, nah, the series over. So what's your feel for Game 1 tonight?
Yeah, I remember telling you in Atlanta in the workout day that was what I thought was the toughest series, because the Phillies didn't have time to prepare for that series. They spent everything with Nolan Wheeler in St. Louis, and then they got to figure it out and start Ranger Suarez in Game 1 in Atlanta. So once it looked like they were going to win Game 1, that's why I said, like, this is over, because now you're going to your guys after this, and it's over, and it was. And I thought once you could get through that series, then you're set. Even if they were playing the Dodgers, it wasn't going to be as hard, because you could at least prepare for it. You could align everything the way you wanted it. And that's what happened with San Diego, that they were able to align for it. And I'm not saying this is a less challenge than Atlanta, but it's obviously a much better team than the Braves that you're playing. But you're able to align yourself and get ready. And I think they will win one of these two games. That's my prediction. I don't know which one they're going to win, tonight or tomorrow. They will win this game. And again, I was the only one that with CS predictions correct and DS with games. The Phillies will win in 5. They will win one of these two games. They get back to the jungle, and they win all 3 games. And there's a parade on a Friday, because I think Game 5 is on a Wednesday.
Oh, interesting.
Sorry if I jumped the gun with predictions. I just
no.
I
think you're right. I think that they do get a split here. My gut tells me they lose tonight and win tomorrow. How do you bet against Justin Verlander? You said he hadn't won a World Series game in his career. He's going to do that. At some point, he has to do that. The guy's great. He's going to go to the Hall of Fame. So tonight's the night he does that. But, then you got Zach Wheeler tomorrow if you're the Phillies. And no panic, no worry if you lose tonight in Game 1. You have Wheeler tomorrow. I like that matchup. And if you go home with a split, you feel pretty good. As you said, there's been no home field advantage like Citizens Bank Park. And you said you've been looking forward to what tonight will be like here in Houston. I've been thinking since Game 5 about what that World Series game is going to be like, those World Series games on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday back in Philly. A friend of mine texted me the other day, and he said, do you remember in 08 and 09 if it was like this? And I said, I'm sure it was loud. I mean, I was there. I'm sure it was loud. I don't remember it being sustained for 9 innings that loud. I mean, even after Sir Anthony threw the 3 wild pitches, I don't remember it getting that quiet in the place. I mean, it got quieter, but it was still like people were still into it on every pitch. And I don't know, again, the memory gets fuzzy as we get older, but I don't know if 08 and 09, if it was like that from start to finish.
I was at Game 3 in 08. I was at one of the DS games, one of the CS games. It was loud, and we stood the whole game in the crowd. But I think there's a different type of energy among people, and this might be like totally off base, but I think the pandemic being away, you couldn't go to games in 20, you couldn't really go to games in 21, and now people are back and they're hungry to do stuff. They're hungry to be together in a community setting, and I think that's just what makes the place so crazy. It's nuts. And Atlanta, this place will be nuts because I think they're loud. The roof will be closed. It'll be loud. But in Atlanta and San Diego, there was two teams that they have fan bases that love the Padres and the Braves, but they don't love the teams the way that, a Philly team, a New York team, a Chicago team, a Boston team loves their teams. Where, like, if the Phillies lose tonight, like, people have a bad day tomorrow. All right? If they lose the World Series, like, my buddy will quit his job the next day. Like, that's what it is. And, like, that comes across in the noise in the crowd. And the reason that it rocked so loud when Hoskins hit that home run with the bat spike is because people were so tight. They were loud. They were energetic. They were into it. But they were so nervous coming after splitting in Atlanta, getting to Game 3. And when he hit that home run, the cauldron blew up. Like, it just, the lid came off, and it just went absolutely nuts because all that nervous energy of people that were sitting on it for 2 days could explode. And the rest of the night, it was just absolutely insane. And the same thing happened in Game 3 of the Padres game when Hoskins hit the home run again. The place went, or Schwarber hit the home run. The place went absolutely nuts. And Game 3, as long as they split, I mean, no matter what, it's going to be nuts. But if they split here and they come back to Philly with 1-1 on Halloween, yeah, it's going to be wild.
Okay, so your keys to the series is get a split, get home, and see what you can do back in the friendly confines of Citizens Bank Park. I'm going to hit. The Phillies have to hit. They have to hit to win the series, plain and simple. And not just in Game 4 when it's a bullpen game and a mix and match. They really hit against the Padres, with the exception of Game 1. They didn't do a ton against Darvish.
But they got Schwarber.
But they had the Schwarber home run. They got big hits when they needed them, and then the volume of hits in Game 4. So timely hitting, again, I think the Astros might be able to win this series with their pitching. I think the Phillies are going to have to win it with their hitting, and kind of go from there. As much as they want Nola and Wheeler to set a tone, as much as they've set a tone, this team was built to score a ton of runs, and I think that they're going to have to score a ton of runs in order to win this series.
Yeah, I would say they have to score more runs than the Astros score.
I would think that that's a good place to start. Yeah. Do we want to make a prediction, or do we want to hold off on that? We made them in the paper. I guess we might as well stick to what we made in the paper.
I mean, mine have been right. Yours have been wrong. So if you want
mine
to
have been totally wrong.
Go ahead.
All right, I have Astros in 6, but I don't think I've gotten one right yet.
Which is the best news for Phillies fans.
Absolutely.
That means it's Phillies in 5. Like I
Which
said,
is what you have, right?
They win on Wednesday. Take off of work now. That Friday, that's when the parade will be. It'll start about 18th and Market. It'll wind down City Hall, and it'll end it'll go through the link. It'll end in Citizens Bank Park. That's heard it here first. The mayor can just call me. I got the plans and everything.
Jot that all down, because he's been right about everything. I'm telling you, he's been right. Anyway, let's wrap it up there. Let's leave it and get ready for Game 1. Thank you very much for joining in to Inquirer Live at GameDay Central, and be sure to stick around on Inquirer.com/World Series to follow along with us as we live tweet throughout the game, post game-related news, and answer all your questions and comments. So for Matt Breen, I'm Scott Lauber. Thank you so much for joining in to GameDay Central, and enjoy Game 1.